Alright, working on this guy. I'm going to make sure that you at least quietly say the 1, 2, 3, and 4. This way you don't get lost in all the ands. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. And, 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 done. So the only downstroke is the very last chord there. Just gotta be careful of that. And hopefully you don't have to yawn while you're counting out loud. It's tough. Alright, 90 beats a minute. 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, 120. 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 2. All right. One, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 3, 4 and 2, 3 and 1, 2 and 4 and 1 and 3, 4 and 2, 3 and 1, 2 and 4 and done. 90. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 3 and 2, 3 and 1 and 4 and 1 and 3 and 2 and 1 and 4 and done. 120. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 3 and 2 and 1 and 4 and 1 and 3 and 2 and 1 and 4 and done. All right, the odd one. So we talked about keeping the strumming going the entire time. So you got to keep that down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up the whole time. Down, whoops, yeah, right. Down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. Just sometimes you hit it, and most of the time for this one you don't. So I mentioned at the very end that this is the first polyrhythm you're doing. So it's basically like a 2 across 3 polyrhythm. You got 2 chords evenly spaced across 3 evenly spaced beats. So there's the 1 chord, beat and a half. The second chord, a beat and a half. Now yes, you have a quarter note tied to an eighth note versus an eighth note tied to a quarter note. However, it's the exact same length of time. So here's what it should look and sound like. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 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 4. Done. 90. 1, 2, 3. Just count that terribly. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 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 4. Done. Good old yawning. 120. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 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 4. Done. Alright. So I thought of something. This might I think you basically already understand, or it seems like you have a pretty good understanding of the whole notes laid out on the fretboard differently, being the same pitch and tone and all that. But let's try something here. Thought of something that might be helpful. Okay, so let's use F since we talked about it. So you got, F in the usual spot, and so if I go here, put F there, you see it's in the exact same space in your staff. Same thing. So if I did this, tried to double it all up there, you would just be seeing like the same thing, I guess, twice there. So you see it's all, yeah, it's the same note. Now you talked about like, well, what if it was the different octaves? So let me change something here. What did I have originally? Boom, 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 boom. So yeah, if you did the octave lower, bam. So there's F, an octave lower. That's as low as you can go with that particular F on the guitar, unless you did an alternate tuning. But we are not going to do an alternate tuning. We're just looking at it as standard. So what if we wanted a higher F? Let's see, where would that be at? Whoa. I think, yeah. So there's F that's an octave higher from this one. So maybe let's do it this way. This might make it even more uniform. So we got the lowest F we can play in a standard tune guitar. We go up to the next F, an octave higher on the same string. We got it there. We can play it on the 13th fret of the E string. We can play it on the 8th fret of the A string. And we can play it on the, I did that earlier today, 3rd fret of the D string. So as you can see in the actual staff, you have the same F, F, F at the same octave. But those are the 3 locations on guitar you can play F in that octave. Now let's go to the next highest one. So I'm going to go an octave above this guy. So you just add 12 and you're up a new octave. So we got 20, and then we got 15 here. 10th fret on the G string would produce the same F. 6th fret on the B string, same, and then 1st fret there on the high E would produce the same fret, the same octave. So actually let's add another one here. So there, I'm just doing the dotted half to fill out the bar. So there you go. You got the lowest sounding F you can play on guitar. There's only one spot for that. You go up to the next octave for F. You have 3 locations on guitar you can play that. The next highest F you can play, 5 locations you can play that. And then for the highest octave of F, you got 1 spot. Now, you could also, if you have enough frets, you can end up bending the high E string even further. Because I got 24 frets on mine, so I could bend the 24th fret up a half step and produce an octave higher of that F. Actually, there's more than one location for this guy. Yeah, you can do that here. And if you got 22 frets, you might. Some guitars only go to 21. There you go. So you got 3 locations you can play this higher pitched F. So as far as like, if you're wondering like, oh man, do I have to memorize all that stuff? Not necessarily. This just really comes from having played for so long and teaching for over 10 years. Like a lot of this stuff, you just say it again and again and again and again. I see it on the fretboard again and again and again. And then I just kind of retain this stuff. So the main thing is, you know, as far as like being able to find notes, like you'll end up memorizing like at least a couple strings pretty well. Like the low E and the high E, same thing as far as note structure goes. So when you pay attention to all the power chord stuff that we do, like the A5 that starts on the low E string starts with the 5th fret on the low E, so you know that's an A note. G5 chord, when you begin on the low E string, that starts on the 3rd fret. That's a G note there. As long as you can remember how many whole steps and half steps are in between notes. So like when you basically want to, you'll find the notes that way, meaning if you remember that there is a half step between E and F and B and C. So E and F, they're back to back. So like you got your open E to the F note, which would be 0, the open E to 1. So that's a half step there on the guitar. You're just adding 1. But all the other notes are a whole step apart. So like F to G is a whole step. Between G and A is a whole step. Between A and B is a whole step. Between C and D is a whole step. And between D and E is a whole step. So E and F, you got the half step. B and C, you have the half step. So you just want to, if you remember that, you'll be able to like navigate through the strings. You know, you can start with the open string and work your way up until you land on the fret that you're trying to figure out. Or you can start at the 12th fret, which is the octave, as you know, and you can like work your way down. So let's say you're on the 10th fret of the B string. So instead of starting with the open B string and working your way up, it's easier to start on the 12th fret of the B string and work your way down. Because if you're a whole step below the 12th fret of the B string, so if you're on the 12th fret of the B string, that's a B. But if you're trying to figure out, well, what's the 10th fret on the B string? Just start with the B note on the 12th fret and work your way down. So if you're going a whole step below B, you're on A, because A and B are a whole step apart. Now what if it was the 11th fret? Well, you could either call it a B flat or an A sharp. When we're dealing with notes in key, I'm saying this thinking maybe I shouldn't say it now. I don't want to confuse you too much, but you might understand this already. But I'll just say it anyway. Because I'm thinking I might be giving too much info right now. I don't want to overload you. So, but if you have any questions with this stuff I'm saying right now, definitely let me know. You can ask it before next week. That's fine. But when you decide if it's like an A sharp or a B flat, a lot of that is determined on what key you're in. So, for example, in the key of F major, you have a B flat, but not an A sharp. The tone is the same, but we use all 7 note names in a major scale. So like the A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You can have like sharps and flat versions of those, but you got to have all 7 notes there. So key of F would be F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E. And it would not be F, G, A sharp, C, and so on, because then we have 2 different A's and 0 B's being used. So it's just a way to help keep things in order. So if you wondered, how can you tell when I brought up the example? Well, if you want to figure out what the 11th fret on the B string is, you can call it a B flat or an A sharp. And if you were wondering, well, how can you tell the difference? Like, when do you know what to call it? If it's not in any context, it doesn't matter. You call it an A sharp or a B flat, it's fine. If you're trying to do it in a specific key, then it matters. But we'll get into that a bit down the road. So hopefully seeing the F's up there like that help clarify things even further. And yeah, if you have any questions that come up you want to ask them before next week, totally can. Or we can tackle them next week. But I will see you next week.